All right, we're going to get on our bolsters to start. So you'll have your bolster lengthwise on the mat with the wall space at the base. I want you to sit up on the bolster when it's in its lean form. So you're not with the bolster wide horizontal. It's lengthwise on your mat. So you kind of feel like you're straddling the bolster a little bit, but it won't feel like that once we begin the movement cycle. Okay, so what we're doing is studying the movement cycle of the breath today. We're going to study the lower ribs and the stomach muscles in the beginning. So have a roll blanket at the base. If it kind of gets a little flimsy on you, it's okay. As long as you have something at the base of your mat. It's never perfect, the roll blanket, but it's something to bring a little height to your legs. So reach the legs on the lower leg bone. So it'll be your calf. You want to feel the area in the back of the lower leg that is squishable. It's mashable. If you kind of tap on it, right? It's interesting, that flesh. So you want to use the blanket to kind of push that flesh to widen at the lower base of the legs. And this is where the predicament goes, how close you are to the wall, isn't it? So if you find, oh no, my feet are already touching, when you lie back, they won't because you slide back, okay? So I want you to sit at the very edge of your bolster. This goes for all heights. Every height, all kinds, all lengths need to be on the edge of the bolster. Okay? It's like you're about ready to go sledding. All right. So when you lower back, you're going to feel where the waist and the back of the waist is on the bolster. And then see if you can let your head rest back on that little height of a blanket. Now, I want that bolster so it really is high up on the spine. We're not there yet, right? We're getting towards it. And I even kind of push myself back a little more than I should have. So I'm finding as much lift in the ribs is the most important part to study the breathing cycle here, the movement cycle of the breath. And so once you're lifting, and there's a lot of movement here of the center body, upper chest mobility, then you're going to take your sand, oh gosh, I hope it's easy to get to, and place it on the front of the pelvis, closer to the thigh lids. So it does feel like the sand is the center of gravity here, okay? Now, if that just feels awkward, you could slide it down. It doesn't have to be right, proper on pelvis, like it's an extra pelvic kind of pressure. And if it feels like you want it up here on the ribs, right here into the solar plexus above the belly, you might like that position of the sand. But you can wag your tail a little bit so that you can feel how this rib spaciousness. I really crave getting my arms to go wide, because the wider I can move the chest to begin, the more comforting it will be in my back muscles. That's really key to learn as we live in our body, especially since backs do get tired, but it's about opening the chest. So we have more room for the breathing muscles and the accentuation of that steady pace of breath. So it can be long, thorough, and cleansing. That could be something you think of in your yoga class, maybe not in your daily habits, but right here we are. Long inhalation, filter the air through the nose, maybe closing your eyes. And exhale and feel where you can let go, where, if it's the legs, if you need to scoot the blanket at the base farther down the back of the leg, or if you're just fine where it's at. And then feeling how that lower rib space, or the spaces in the lower ribs, really have a little bit more flexibility. Right, because there's not like the heart and the lungs, upper rib space, the lower space of the ribs almost have this mobility we don't tap into. So that means that we relax the stomach muscles. And let yourself relax your stomach muscles, and maybe you think of it as abdominal as well, but you relax that lower core so you get a thorough breath. You're not holding back. And if you need to reset the blanket under your head and kind of curl it under your neck, that's okay. I've seen versions where the blanket is actually curled. I'm working on getting my length in my spine, so I want my head to feel like it tilts a little bit back, but that might be too excessive for some of us with just how it feels in our muscles and our neck. You don't want to cause a headache. Okay, so taking a few moments here to feel the movement chamber of the ribs. Steady, slow, and breathing. And you could sample breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. You could sample breathing only through the nose, both directions, and relaxing the face. And at some point, that movement of the breathing experience maybe brings the upper part of the back into a little more definition. So it is a pretty concrete muscular frame at the upper back, right, or trapezius. So you might notice, that's kind of heavy in the mix here of support for you. So just stay with that awareness of opening the front body and centering the back body for a few more moments. Again, that abdominal area is relaxed. The lower ribs expand easier than really any other part, right, of our lungs. So we want to feel that the lower ribs expand. And that might be an area that you might feel like you're kind of stiff in movement with breath. Strengthening the diaphragm by letting the abdominal zone just move comfortably, no holding back with the movement. Okay, now as we shift, feel if you can move like you're trying to slide the shoulders down the back of it. So it's an interesting trial for this one. It almost feels as if I kind of pin my upper back into the bolster, parts I can touch, which is really these interesting shoulder areas that when you push back, they might respond with more tension. So feel if your arms are in cactus position, elbows are out. And then see if you can start to slide the arms, even if they're off the floor, down. So they might kind of pinch a bit into the bolster, and then the arms are down, and then the upper back piece into the shoulder probably gets kind of tucked into the bolster. So slide the sand away and bring the knees to bend up. And maybe some of us will take cobbler's pose, so feet together, knees apart. Or if you can bring the feet up to the bolster, knees apart. That's a bit intense on a knee. So I'm very content with my feet on the floor and the knees apart. So the feet are together, soles of the feet towards each other, and the knees outwards. So a little bit of stretch through the groins, through that lymphatic return is where we're going next. So feel where there might be simplicity for you. This could become kind of easy going. And now this kind of carving from the ribs down into the softer areas of abdominal, stomach area. I want you to let that area flow up and down with the breath, and see if you can keep that repetition as you move the knees to point up and the bottoms of the feet stand on the ground. So basically the lower leg parts are standing. And then you're going to push into your feet and reach down for the bolster And I want you to lift up the hips and have some caution here how you lengthen the neck. So if you've got a roll blanket, I want you to kind of push that back so there's just a small amount of blanket under your head. And you lift up the hips, slide back, and then take the bolster with one hand, push it over to the side, it's still under you, turn the bolster horizontal and sit on it so you can still finagle the position after you are on the bolster. I would lower down on the bolster, slide a little bit downwards towards the wall so that you can find that feature of bolster across and horizontal. This could be the most challenging transition, I think, for the class. But when you do feel that there's this emptiness at the ribs that you just had some support with. So here's where you might find this is going to be more comfortable. So you lift up the feet, your blanket can stay down below. And find first kind of that deepest squeeze of the knees. Blanket can stay flat. I'm going to fold mine one more to a quarter fold. I like brain float poses and so forth with a little higher blanket under my head, even though my head doesn't always touch it with brain float. But have the position, not blanket float, but brain float. Blanket float. Okay. So hips centered, stretch the left leg down, hold the back of the right thigh and bending. And I want you to pause there for a moment and start to feed into that circulation that leads from the pelvis, the back of the pelvis, to that right leg. It's simple. Maybe it's not felt in the spine for everyone. And let's take the next side, alternate right leg now down, left knee bends. Feel how you coordinate motioning that left leg into the left side of the torso. Okay, the left foot could be pretty relaxed, doesn't need to do any actions. And now we'll go with a little faster pace. So bring the right knee in as the left leg lowers down. You don't have to hold the legs for this version. So what you could do is have the hands on the sides of the bolster and then articulate that alternating, but the key for the alternating reach is that the leg that goes down goes to the floor. And then you can switch at your own pace. But I want you to get a feel of kind of sampling. If the knee that comes in, if the foot is flexed, if you let the leg that comes in kind of fling up, and just feel the circulation and that motion in leg muscles, and then come to a stop and take a ball or block between the knees. And once that prop is kind of centered between the knees, right? You don't want to go to the closer to the inner thigh, lower. You want to find that when you push into it, that the leg muscles actually feel like they grip. Okay, so they grip. It's like body parts, muscle areas below the hips, from the hip to the knee, are in kind of a toning position. Okay. So feel if you can let the knees kind of swing so the feet go up. And then when you're pushing into your ball or block, then noticing if your neck is comfortable, if this blanket's too high, too low, too far in, adjust so that your center of your skull can basically relax back. Maybe even if you use your fingers to touch onto that, to adjust. Okay, now when the legs have lift, I want you to push into the ball. It's nice to have something that's a responsive surface like a ball. The blocks work okay, but remember they don't respond and change the resistance in the leg the same, not quite the same. Okay, now I bring the hands to the top of the thighs, right at the crease. And I want you to work here on kind of unload. So you're going to let the back of the pelvis kind of press a bit, flex through your feet, That helps. And then as you bend the knees to that right angle, or so you, as far as you can see, to the feet, I want you to push into the ball. If you have stopped, I did. Okay. And then take the arms so they stretch open. You've got stuff in your way, move it so you got arm reach out from the chest. So about a little bit out from the line of the heart would be good measurement. And then relax your feet and let the knees rock side to side with that spacer between them. Okay, I know we can do this without the spacer between the knees, but I want you to feel when you lean over, if you've got something between the knees, it will allow the waist to lift, the back of the waist to lift a little higher. But if I don't have the ball, it's a little different of a lift with the back of the waist. So use the ball or the block if possible. Your feet could touch. But see if you can get your armpit area to also stretch. So it kind of feels like there's this bit of rolling even in the ribs. Not just the hips, even though that they're obviously rolling side to side, but the ribs can roll. Let your head maybe roll to the side when your knees go. So when your knees go right, your head rolls to the left. The chest is open. And when your knees go to the left, your head goes right. Of course, continue for breathing purposes. So feeling as you go center, it's an inhale. And as you go to the side, you've got two sides, you exhale. Take a few more kind of curious reaches with the position of the knees moving, and the arms are still. Right? They're not actively going side to side. You know, when you come back into center, try a bridge pose. I know this is actually kind of like we're in a constant bit of a bridge energy with the hips up, the inversion. But when you lower your feet down, you know, you have to kind of equate the balance here in the lower abdominal muscles. If you touch the blanket, that's fine. You know, even if you stand on it, I guess, with your feet, that might feel pretty good too, huh? And I think I like my feet on the blanket better, but I'll go with that. So feel where the crease is here in the hips. Okay, see if you can just shift your ribs a little bit side to side. You know, if it's possible, you can trust this one. You're just going to let go of the pressure pushing into the block or the ball. I guess it could bounce up, but I don't think it's going to be too much bouncing. Okay, and if it's a block, it will just stop on the floor. Okay, now grab a belt, and you're going to get that left leg to extend down. If there's a ball in your way, you might use your other foot to kind of shift it over. And as that leg stretches down, you'll take a sandbag and apply it carefully. Keep your arms real close to your body so you don't strain the shoulders. But sand can go straight down the front of the left thigh, would probably be an ideal circulation, right, for the hip. Okay, now we have to kind of counterbalance this even before we get too busy with the belt under the right foot. You kind of know where you're going. You've got a belt loop, you're going to place it under your right foot and lift up. Now, that kind of helps that back arch. Once the leg goes up and the left leg has support, the back might feel like, yes, there's a bit of an arch, which is a great thing. We want a natural curve in the back. When the leg swings up, that hamstring pulley with the belt. So now we go into our next phase. We've got our loop. So I like to have the buckle so that it faces the direction of my dominant hand. So what I could do is pull it and loosen it, but I think that means a lot, but I'm not so certain it does. So make sure there's plenty of loop, and then take the belt behind your head, center, and not too tight. I mean, I know it's going to be as tight as it's going to be. There's no change of the belt restriction, I suppose, but if it feels like your hamstring has just it's too overwhelming, you can loosen up the belt, but you could also bend the knee and let your head lean back in the belt. Yeah, I think they're both interesting. I prefer the leg to be straight and work with my range of motion also in my neck. Okay, so the arms could be out and down. You could also continue to fuss with the belt to find just the right length for yourself. And it's fine if you have so much length with the belt that your head is touching the blankets. It's fine. So I want you to have the possibility of using this for traction. It's also for holding the leg up. Your brain's holding it up without straining your arms and your hands, your wrists. That's another reason for this. So it's not just that it looks kind of interesting and creative for the spine, but it might be a little bit easier for your inner experience in the leg and that right side of the back and towards the neck. Okay, so feel where your belt is under your foot. Is it at the center of the foot, the arch? It could be at the heel. I find it best kind of in the middle, kind of the upper middle of the foot, the ball of the foot. Just go inwards to breathing and elongating, obviously, a part of the body. After some time, you might not notice how high the leg actually is. You might turn the foot a little bit out or perhaps right in the center. You might even try bending the knee a bit and just kind of feel the environment around that right hamstring. It's nice to kind of it's not necessarily a soothing field of experience, is it? But to kind of notice the field work that we're doing in the legs here, even the front of that left hip. Okay. All right, now we're going to shift into a crossover so you can keep your sand on the belly, okay, or you can put it on the side. Okay, so if it's uncomfortable and you put your sand on your belly, then you would just slide it down. No requirement. It's kind of an interesting aligner, you know, if I take the sand across, you can't do it any other way anyhow. But as I grab onto the belt, slide it off the back of my head rests back, let your head maybe nod. And then as you hold the belt with the left hand, I do want you to give a try of feel how you reach your arm up to the belt and also give yourself a little slack so that left upper arm, kind of in the bicep area, has some tone, but you're not like pulling your shoulder higher, right? So feel where you have to use the tone of the bicep to guide that left shoulder in a downward direction, okay? And then right arm is out and just straight out to the side. And before you cross the right leg over, see if you can let your head roll to the right and feel what muscles, well, actually you don't have to identify and name all the muscles that do that movement, but just let your head roll right. You know, trust the process here. Feel when you hold that leg and start to cross it over to the left. Yeah, and if you just go the right amount, right? Then maybe you identify with going all the way into the extent of the range of motion, but maybe just go a little bit. Maybe you move the sand because you kind of feel like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'll move it a little bit over to the right. Maybe you move it right in the center a little higher up. or get rid of it. Okay. So feel when you cross over with that right leg, that reach in the hip. You can bend the right knee, you can straighten the leg. Okay, now it doesn't have to be an overblown experience with the hip here. Sometimes something kind of mellow is best, right? So find a little bit of a mellow range of motion. That's going to be the name of this one, probably mellow. Okay, so come back up with the leg and switch the leg that's up. It's a little bit of a core workout with sand on there. Okay, right leg stretches down, and then, yeah, that's my idea of a core is just to put a sandbag on my core and be. Turn the sandbag straight down the right leg. Don't let it go too far because it might fall off. And if your arch in your back is getting to be concerning, remember, make sure you have plenty of blanket under your head. That will help the whole arching because it's 3 different segments in the back. So now you got your belt under your left foot, and you make sure you got plenty of a loop here that you can work with. And the right foot relaxes. Yeah, I happen to love this blanket under my lower leg for this pose. I like this because we used to do this with a block under the foot sometimes, or the other bolster. Now this is kind of in between those two. Now you might just notice how your knee is kind of setting itself up for inversion. Sometimes it's good to kind of just fuss a little bit with the connective tissue on the leg, right? You can get a hold of it with your fingers, kind of massage to get that to drain, right? All that drain in the legs since the blood flow goes down all day, especially when you're pretty active. It's good to get it upside down. So feeling where your head leans back. I bet one side is different than the other with just how high your head is on this one. So if you're not recording yourself, it isn't a bad idea to sometimes, that could be a little homework project, right? Do a little video of yourself doing brain flow and then see what happens from one side to the next, how the height is for your neck. You want to try to balance it, and part of it's your hamstring mobility on one side versus the other, isn't it? Okay, so arms are open. You can't turn your head much on this one, huh? I see some people work with that. Not a bad idea. It's not something you have to have a lot of precaution for, but some of us might feel just fine letting our head just lean back and trust the balance of the throat. And then the back of that throat up into the brainstem is where it can get kind of always grippy. So really let your head lean back into the belt. Now let the hamstring feel the work versus your neck, huh? The hamstring can walk itself out, but your neck really can't. It's kind of it's a distal part of the body, right? The brain is as distal as it gets. So that area has a different experience with opportunities to loosen up. Now, when you feel the traction of the breath, come back to that anytime. And you might feel when you let the shoulders, almost like you're trying to reach open with the chest, although it's a real minor motion to press the shoulders back. You'll bring your hands to your head on the back at the belt. And you can also grab on the sides. And then taking off your belt, your little helmet, your belmet, your belt helmet. And then you'll move the sand either off. This time you might even try without it and just kind of see, was it helpful, was it not? Holding the belt with the right hand, first things first here. You're holding the belt. Feel just the right amount of intensity in my right bicep. And then let your head roll to the left. Your left arm is open. Maybe close your eyes. And then cross the left leg to the right side. You know, and you reach it across, you do have options here. You have options to micro bend, to kind of push your left buttock a little bit outwards. You have these things that might come up where you're efforting more. So just feel what's kind of a natural length. And for me, sometimes stopping about maybe halfway that my maximum or even a little less than that is the best choice, just to kind of let that circulation kind of steep the hip. Right, that's what makes it restorative, is the time and the position supported so you can remain in it. But you know, there's always more support you could offer this kind of position. This is a little bit more than a restorative, right? It's you're pushing the edge slightly. So if you feel like you need a little bit more ease, don't go quite so far. Or make sure the right elbow is on the ground. Even if your head reaches over to the left and turns, belly moves with the breath. Even more important on this one, huh? Sometimes we kind of stop that movement and then we breathe higher up in the ribs. So, especially because the movement's low. Now, as you bring the left knee to a little bit of bending, let's take a wide stance and we'll bring the head back center. Hands hold the belt wide and like, come on foot, come on up into the belt, right? So as you push the feet out, you might want your loop to be bigger for the leg expression. You might find, oh, this is just perfect because now I can let go and it's not too much, or maybe it is too much. So experience just how the feet push a little bit. Also feel if the heels shift outward, so it has a little bit more of a turn in the ankle bone, and noticing that mobility of your ankles. This is a great one for ankle mobility because you're not standing on your feet, so they don't have that weight put on them, which the poor feet get all day. They get stepped on all day. So, you know, just play with this one. If you're not so jazzed about this turning the foot stuff and shifting and healing, then don't worry about it, right? You can just be. But it is different for the knee. So I try to isolate so my knees stay just, I don't want to do any movement with the knee. They're upside down. They're happy to be, you know, draining out here, the fluid retention. So I'm just trying to work with the ankle, a little bit of that turn in. Of course, you could also do the opposite and turn it out. Okay. So give it a few more moments of inversion. All right. And feel when the knees start to bend. Okay, and if the back of the pelvis feels like, okay, you want it to feel like it widens, it doesn't contract. So noticing when I bend the knees, I try to let the knees go wide, not go in, and then hold on to the belt. I mean, you can't really see that here probably. But as I slide the feet together, we're going to bring the knees in to slide the belt off the feet. And now you're going to roll to the left. And when you roll left, I want you to stretch your hips down to the other side of the bolster. Yeah, the bolster's already ready. It's already horizontal, so we're kind of setting ourselves up now for side stitch. Okay. All right, phase 2. Okay, so take a blanket from below and kind of, I guess wadding it up is fine too. That'd be a funny description, huh? But have the blankets in a big stack behind you. I suppose at home you can get even more towels and so forth. And then find that ball, for some of us, not for all, and place it near your left knee. And then the block is on the other side of the blankets. It's above you when you get onto your side. Sand is another thing, right? So you might use it, you might not. If you're feeling a little bit drained, then you don't have to use the sand. It's an option. But I find it easier to put it on my bolster. So I have it like my left hand is holding the sand and it's on here because then I can slide my arm in between with the, you'll see. Okay, so you got a ball inside the right leg for a few of us. Okay. Could be many of us. Now lean in, and then when you bring your shoulder next to that blanket, you want to be between the bolster and the blankets, right? You don't want to be on the blanket with your shoulder. I know some of you know this way too well, but I still see that almost like people get on the blanket. So only is place for your head, okay? Then place the sand up to that right side. You gotta find clever ways of getting your sand on without straining your shoulders. Even if it's just merely like a weight on the hip and not your ribs, that's fine. Because when you stretch your arm overhead and move the block anywhere you want to, any of the spaces overhead, it could be to the right or left or straight back. When the sand is on that side, that is what stretches this side too, right? So even though you might think, no, if I have it up here, it's better. I don't think that's really true, because if I look at just the architecture of the whole thing, you just see where the angle is. If I wait here on my hip and then I stretch over, I just feel a better stretch here for me. It's up to you. It also gives you a good weight training for your breathing muscles with the sand here as well. So let your head lean down into the blankets. And then feel where the weight is into that left hip. Take a gradual stretch of your breathing muscles. Yeah, the idea we had earlier where the lower ribs, right, expand easier than other parts of our lungs, okay. Because there's different matter in that area. There's just not all this other stuff like inside, you know, the heart. Well, there's organs below. They're in that lower space too. So that's an interesting topic. But here we're emphasizing the ribs. And then a different feeling of moving them when you're on your side. If this is a strain on your shoulder after a few moments, you might put your arm down by your side. You might flow it so it's in a little bit of motion, opening the chest, elbow back. And if you're lucky, near a wall, you can just touch the wall. Or you can also let the arm really relax on the side, like I said, or down to the bolster. Okay, and the weight is in that left hip. Just use your breath to center you. It may not always calm you, but using it to center and help the insides with the circulation. Okay, now when you do feel there's a little bit of arch for some of us, like there's a slight bit of twist on this one. Some of us are really straight down into the, with our head leaning like you're sleeping into the blanket. They're both right. So as you decide how to transition here to hands, I want you to let, the first thing is the sand goes right behind you. Okay, and then when I turn to the waist, I'm going to try to get my ribs to help me rotate. I mean, we know that they're the rotators, that part of the spine. It's kind of funny that it's that we want to roll on them too, especially if you got something soft under you. So try to roll into the ribs, down on the bolster, and come on up. All right, and let's stretch our back with the prop. So you're going to shift onto hands and knees. And actually first knees, right? The hands are going to be somewhere reaching. You'll take your bolster on top of your blankets. And then you'll feel the arms in that reach. And take it slow. I like to kind of feel just that the fibers kind of reaching in my, so it's complete. It's the whole back. Before, the last pose was one-sided. So your knees can be farther out. You don't want to go too far because it can get kind of funky stress on the knee when they wobble back and forth. But feel when you reach back with the hips, and maybe your head can sink down between the arms a little bit. Breathing. Yeah, don't catch your breath, like hold it. See if you can, even though this is quite a long stretch, right? So it can be one where you tend to kind of seize the breath. But feel it stretch. You might nod your head. You might turn your head a little bit side to side and rotate it. That's kind of nice to do here. So my arms are straight. I'm just letting my head turn. Feel that movement in my neck. Okay, now hands are down on the floor and move the spine into cat pose, chin towards chest, spine stretch. Okay, gently arch. Some of us will come back to a child's pose and some will come back to downward dog. So if your knees feel kind of crunched up when you go here, some of you are fine with this, I know. Head can rest on the hands, and some of us will push and lift so the knees aren't pressing, and get a little bit of stretch through the back line in downward dog. Okay, so either one, they are a little bit different energetically, aren't they? But I want you to be feeling comfortable in your knees. That's the biggest part here. So when you reach the feet back and you can feel the bottom of the feet in down dog, make sure the hands are wide out. They're stretching far out on the mat. If your knees are on the ground in child's pose, I want you to bring your hands a little farther out. Same thing, but same kind of direction with arms, but not with the hips. Okay, so let's all meet coming down to the knees. Those of you in child's pose can slowly come up to table. Okay, and then taking the bolster off the blankets. So shift it right in center. And then let's take side sage to that right hip down. So we're going to lean down to our right hip on the ground next to the bolster. Then maybe a ball on the inside of the left leg. And when you lean down, take some care that that sand is about the same zone as the last side. So if you decided you're going to stay kind of on hip proper, place it to where it's weight bearing. Now it'll be weight bearing on the hip if it's on the hip. And it's also a little more weight bearing on the hip that's on the ground. So when I feel the body kind of start to linger in this shape, I also like to kind of catch where I can really use the props to kind of facilitate the range of motion. And it's key to relax your stomach muscles. I think that's something I'm just always working on in this practice is Since it's such a mobile area with the breath, just let it relax. Feel that you can breathe through the nose, and that can expand in that middle body. The movement chamber, not just of the ribs, because that's pretty tactile, isn't it? But it's even kind of vast spaces that surround the organs. And feeling that alternating squeeze. You can push the ball if it's under your knee a little bit back. You can also help it go the other way if your knee needs help. It'll let you know, won't it? And then as you kind of persuade the hip into the right zone, because the hip has to center too, and your brain has to find some place, even though that's interesting to find that's a center, huh? Let the weight of your head lean down. And the hip heavy. Remember, you decide where your left arm is going to be. This might be completely a bad idea to have it overhead. It might be better down to the bolster, or stretching the chest open, or on the side. Now feel the two-part breath. Feel the inhale for a count of 4 to 5. And let the exhale out for 1 count further than the inhale. And maybe it's a felt sense versus a timing. That might be a nice way for you to breathe, not to be so clinical, right? To really express the circulation with your breath. I know timing it's not the most happy way to experience breathing. It doesn't have a lot of joy to that. So noticing that, especially if you can create that for your body. Okay, now when you stretch the weight in that left side, whether my hand is down or my arm is over and reaching, even though this might seem like it's more of this stretch, when I put my hand down on the bolster or just down my side, I can still find a stretch in my ribs. Okay. So let that be somewhat important here for you when we come up. So when you lean into your right hip, let the sand, actually let's have the sand go back behind you to the left, just let it drop. And then again, feel how the ribs, this could be a little bit of an exercise for you, just to be on your bolster and kind of go a little bit back and forth in general. All right, so the ribs get a little bit of massage. And that in turn helps the back, right? So when you come up, what we'll do is we'll kind of reset our places, reorganize our props. So what you'll do is you'll put your bolster, I think it could be, just purely on the side, but the blankets are important. So pull those in towards your seat, and you're going to sit on them anyway. So I don't like to put them too close in and have to push my whole entire being back. So sit up and have your feet touch the wall. Have some blocks. I'm not sure exactly how many you're going to need for this. Your sand will come and play a little bit, so that's why I want you to have it kind of over here on the left. And I'm moving mine back more than you need to, just so you can see. All right, so step the right foot to the wall and have the blankets. So you could do 1 blanket, you could do 2. If the 2 seems like it's just too easy, maybe it's okay to feel like it's too easy. 1 does feel like a little easier to manage than 2, but this is interesting. So my blanket is under my buttock and all the way under the top of my thigh. So it's kind of up to about here. It's not just sitting down there. It's a little lower. You can do 1 or 2, as I mentioned already. So my right heel pushes the base of the wall. and my left foot crosses over. It's actually my leg, right? So when my knee is pointing up on that left leg, I'm using the left foot to the right lower side of the leg. It's really an interesting sensation if you study it for a bit in how the leg pattern has to stretch. So this whole side band, the knee, if this doesn't hurt your knee, I would do this one as an exercise to help strengthen around it. And I don't want you to torque the knee. So I'm simply, everybody see how this is? I don't know if I can stand and show it very well. Can you see how this? So my leg, I know that's touching the wall, right? It's touching. But this left leg is crossed over. So that left ankle, right, is next to the lower leg bone. Okay. All right. So now no sand. Okay. Push into your foot. You've got to really be able to push the wall. Okay. Now lift up the heart. Oh, come on, get in there, lift it up. All right. So feeling if the neck can just center here. Maybe let your chin go a little side to side. Okay. And then you want your heart to stay pretty centered and to get the right hand to hold the left leg and help you twist. Now your heart doesn't have to stay towards the wall. Left hand comes back. I imagine it's going to be something back there, huh? The ball's not going to work because I'll just roll out. But my block will help. See, this is a work in process for me, really. So my block is going to help for the time. Okay, right elbow hooks to the left leg. So we got this one down. So when you turn, now there's probably a change in some parts of awareness from what you did a few moments ago. But I want you to explore where the movement of the breath is. And if you kind of get a little sulky in this one, notice that, like the body kind of sulks, I find in this position, sulking heart. So feel if you can push into that left leg with the right arm. That hurts. If it hurts, then we're not doing that. You can hug the leg in too. And you might like that version. I like that a little bit. I could kind of scoot my left foot now a little higher besides my right leg. It's not besides the calf, but it's now above the side of my right knee. And I can get the lift of my chest. All right, so come into it for a few more moments. If you don't use the block or you want to take it a little lower, that's fine. You want to feel like it's a substantial support so you don't have to strain more in the shoulder. So give it enough height. It's always going to be a little tenuous in a twist because you're going somewhere when you're twisting. Right? You're looking behind you. The front of the body's going somewhere as well. Okay, now let your eyes close. Feel where you're holding, where the strength is, you're pursuing strength in parts of the spine here. Okay, so we're going to stay with this side for a bit. So I want you to release the pressure with that right arm. And now we'll come almost forward, but I want you to keep this left leg connected to the right leg in a different way. So we'll lift the left leg and step it to the inside of the right thigh. You're going to pivot. So I'm going to turn, and this blanket feels almost too high, but I'm going to stay with the because it makes it a little easier to do. So if you want to go down to one blanket, it's fine. You may just have been on one blanket. So this holds the knee up quite high, right? So that's one good thing about the blanket. And if you have one blanket and your knee is up, you can use your ball, right? Let's say my leg was lower. I would use a ball here, but this is kind of a ridiculous height because now I'm going away from my flexibility, right? So add a sandbag to the left thigh. And get a feel when you have sand on that left leg. Then you're going to take a block besides the right leg. Make sure the right foot has a proper amount of support with the wall. And here's something I actually saw someone do the other day in class that was nice. They put a ball underneath the knee And so when they lean, it's nice, it feels good. Your knee might push down and hyperextend. So if you've got a little more hyperextension, just put something under it, whether it's a towel or maybe it's the ball. But when you lean in, I want you to have your block besides the right leg, ball or no ball. And the block could be this height, it could be the higher height. And you're going to reach down to that block and let the waist lengthen and the left arm reach behind you. Okay, and feel where the waist turns. Feel where there's rotation. Yes, so the right foot touches the wall and the leg is reaching and the torso. There you go. So that's good play. You could use your position of your hands for your head to lean into. That's a good idea. And the left arm, of course, could stretch up towards the ceiling. That's an option, but you might feel more comfortable with the arm behind you to kind of steepen the position. Maybe a little bit of both is okay. Yeah, create that length through the side. Try to keep the torso that you've been lying on with the bolster under you kind of engaged. This is a lot of breathing empowerment for this session, huh? Twists and reaches, side stretches. Take a few moments with that length. Okay, now that the length is, some part of the body is compressed, some is lengthening. You're going to let the left arm go back behind you if it's not already there. And when you do let go of the position, come up. And now I want you to turn just pretty carefully here. So if you've got anything under that right leg, move it. And then the left leg with the sand, take that off completely, drop it. And then turn so you're facing the wall in a simple cross-legged pose. Right leg cross forward of left, right heel is kind of in front of the left shin. I like a ball under the left thigh. It's a little bit more supportive of my back musculature. And then you have an option to put your sand on the right thigh. Now see how you could, some of you that are have the length will be able to touch the wall for this. But then there's the rest of us that'll have a block set in front of us and lean forward into that block, okay, or blocks. But if you do touch the wall, it's fine. Right? If this is achievable for you and it feels kind of interesting because it's not droopy, right? You might put your hands on the ground instead of the blocks. Maybe you might like that deeper stretch. Give it a few moments where there is length, extension out of the spine, and maybe you can feel where the body leans forward a little bit more for this one. Breathing slow. Exhaling completely. Ribs expand and contract. There's always more rib possibilities, right, with your breath. So you have to relate to how you receive your breath and how you relax on your out breath. Okay, this is the perfect prep for the second side. So we only have one more side on this. So when you come back up with the hands, stretch the legs back forward. So you might take both of your legs reaching. They don't have to exactly touch the wall. You might start with them like this, kind of let them shake out, feel the shoulders lift and roll back. And see if you can feel where the shoulders have motion and then where they find their end range, what you might think is your end range, huh? Now, when we change sides, we want the left foot touching the wall. So we're going to reach ourselves as forward as you need to. You might have to scoot your blankies or one blanket. Yeah, and some of you might like to be kind of on the verge with your sitting bones on the blanket. Not so much blanket underneath your rear. So some of you might find that works better for you. So you kind of lean into the stretch. Okay, now lifting up, and when we turn to the right, again, you might need a block behind you. I imagine probably 80% of us will, but when you push into that wall, that's really key, is this left foot pushing. And in the waist, right? This lumbar area is connected to that lower belly, right? Okay, it's really chunky vertebrae in the back. Those are thick. So when I turn, I don't want to twist those. That's why I use a blanket height as well, because it kind of mirrors that support. I want to use the connection of my ribs to turn. So you'll find the health of your lungs on this one pretty quickly. So the left arm pressing to that right leg and feeling when there's rotation to the right. And maybe visualize, like when you turn a top on something, you're twisting something open. Kind of feel yourself with that rotation in the ribs. And there's always more. So feel your foot push into the wall. Breathing. Ribs expand. And they center. Okay, let's go into the next one right from here. So I know I'm facing away from you, but I want you to kind of keep this pursuit. So you're already in turning right to the right. Already going right. So you're going to take the right foot to the inside of the left leg now, step it out, and then pivot. So you're going to turn. Now, you might be too close to the wall when you take this turn, because now the leg advances, it kind of stretches out of the root of the back. You might push the blanket just a titch back here. Okay, a little bit farther away from the wall. And then add the sand to the right thigh. Maybe the ball under the left knee, maybe not. It might just seem like just not important to you, and that's fine. It might be for some of us. So when I turn, I've already got this turning event going on in my ribs. So you can tell that part of the spine that turns, and then the base kind of has that wide base of support, so keeping that solid. You could practice like cat-cow here and just kind of feel the alternating movement of the ribs. But then once you're up with the heart, you're going to lean to your left side, to your elbow on the block, or maybe you like to reach a little farther down than this. Maybe the block is flat. So here we are. So we're leaning to the left side, and then the waist turns. And that's the important part here, is the waist is turning and the right arm is either back and down or up and over. And feel where the ribs have a lip. And kind of maintain that balance down into your sitting. You got more weight on the left sitting bone. You got the waist reaching. Breathe. If your head feels like it's gripping more on that side that's up towards the ceiling, then you might let your head just gently turn to the left. Open the chest. Even if the right arm is down behind you, you can still turn the chest open. Now, when you do come up, you're going to bring the right hand maybe down to the waist. Maybe you like to kind of flap your wing and come up. That's okay too. Sometimes that's a nice momentum to get upright with the waist. And then turn to the wall, left leg bends, cross it in front of the right shin. And then when you start to lean forward, you can put a ball under a knee. You can take your blocks both in front, but first thing is that sand on the left thigh. Okay, so sand up the very top. And it's also it's top but inside, right? So it's on the contour of the leg. And then when you shift your waist into center, you're going to reach the torso forwards. Okay, lean into it. That's the key, is leaning into the bones so that you can kind of saturate them. So they're living tissue. They're soaking it up. If anything doesn't feel okay on a knee joint, use some cushion under it, whether it's the ball or another blanket or towel in your house. Maybe you have to have even more props ready to go. Okay, if you're folding towels, you can just put them next to your yoga set or clothes or whatever. So when you lean into it, feel if the ribs go a little side to side. And find where you energize in the ribs motion with the breath. Okay, the hands have a placement, right? They're on the ground or the blocks or the wall. Some of you, the wall is going to feel like a nice adventure for your sensation in the back of the pelvis. Because we're trying to lift it up and over. And that's exactly what we're going towards here, is lifting up into in a moment in the pelvis. So when you come back with the hands onto the legs and help yourself up, take a motion where you take the sand over to the right side, and your blocks are going to be kind of important here. So take the bolster across the mat, horizontal to the wall. And I think having your blocks each on the side would be good on this to start. Actually, maybe a little higher because your arms aren't going to be that far down when you're in your back. Okay, so uncross through the legs. Let's get them upside down to shake them out. So you're going to push back your blanket, sit down on the firm ground to get rid of one of those blankets, actually. I'm not going to need one of them. Okay, and then when you lower back, the back of the pelvis has had this interesting interaction for a while. So first things first here is we will have our feet on the bolster or the wall. You can do either. However high you get your hips is kind of individual how it will be successful, I think, with the lift. So you do want to get your feet on something. And again, the wall is kind of an interesting project too. But you'll take both of the blocks from the outside in, and they'll be at the second height, second setting, and then place them in. Now, if that is, if for any reason this doesn't, you don't achieve it, you can have your blocks low. That's fine. Okay. You can also try the block higher. So if you decide you want to go a little bit higher, what I recommend you try for this back pelvis lift off is you could put your feet on the wall. That way you can get higher. See, if I have my feet on the bolster, it just gets me, this gets the lift up more. So you might try that. If you like that height for your bridge, you can stack the two blocks and get quite the thyroid circulation here. And they're low height, right? And I stack them and put my feet down. Now, it could be interesting just to align there. Okay, once you're into that kind of major bridge, maybe no blanket. Some of you are going to find there's no way you're going to go without some padding under your head. But it's about that length and from the brainstem right up. So that skull has a little bit of touch. Well, actually, it's not a little, it's pretty heavy duty, isn't it? And interesting when you feel that weight of the skull. So shoulders roll down and in, big time. Open the chest, big time. You could have your feet up at the wall, so it's more of a shoulder stand. You could work with that. You can kind of play with that, get closer to the wall. You can scoot yourself down. And that's interesting. So I don't want you to feel like you've got to have your knees kind of this proper bend of sorts. Kind of explore how this affects your circulation. And if you're bothered by not having a blanket under your head, just put it back. Okay, it's just fine. Okay, so study the motion. Of course, the breath is obvious motion. It's like the only motion going. But I'm sure there's some inner motion, right, with the pelvis since it's upside down. Right, you're tipping it, so you're creating that circulation of inversion, that lymphatic return. Okay, now if you decide, because we'll be doing an option to do legs up at the wall very soon, but if you want to take your legs straight up here with the firm support of a block under your pelvis, which is a different definition than a bolster, go for it. It might feel pretty interesting with the stability. It's quite a bit more stability than something squishy. But the key here is to try to get your shoulders, that they can almost never go enough on this one. So you really are trying to roll the shoulders down and in towards the spine, but it really is towards the thicker back muscles. I mean, have you ever had your shoulders have some feeling like they were tickling your spine or something? I don't think I've experienced that. I don't want to, I guess. All right, so let the legs help you center out of this. So if you have your legs lifted, you know you're doing a good pose if you sound different, your sinuses, right? You can notice the nasal change when you're upside down, that drain. Okay, now when you lower down, we're going to do a little bit of massage work. So you're going to lower your feet down to the bolster. Now, if you have a lot of lift, like the 2-block highest one, you'll probably have to come out with your feet at the wall. You don't want it to shove too much in the spine. So I like to press into the feet and then just lift my hips just enough and then let my spine go back down. I don't want to spend energy gripping a lot. Okay, now if you got no blanket, you got to get one now. So pull the blanket in under your head and take a ball, bring your feet to your bolster and lift up the hips, and you'll put the ball under the left buttock and massage into the glute medius, but it's going to go all over, isn't it? The circulation. So the arms could be lifting at the elbow to the hand. That's typical. Have a little bit of energy with the arms so that you can jab your elbows down. But feel when you move back and forth, side to side, right? You're jostling the connective fibers, what I think of it as, kind of fibrous motion. Okay, now feel where there's body weight into the ball, and then try to create a good amount of movement. And then get to the other side by carefully lifting a little, but not too much. Lower down. Maybe your ball is a little bit to the side of that glute medius. Maybe you kind of just push it a little bit towards what you feel is kind of your hip attachment. That might feel interesting. Some will go closer in towards the sacroiliac area. It's really up to you. That would be a little higher, right? So, but finding where you might have some spaces that are feeling really tense, create some movement there. And then when you feel that circulation, you might stop and just let the right hip straight open, or you can keep movement. Okay, so let's get a feeling here when there's movement now. Just lift the hips up, slide the ball out, and lower the spine down. Okay, once you feel the spine is as centered as you can tell, breathe. Okay, try to get the movement of the breath in the abdominal, the belly area. Okay, now as you find that centeredness, kind of a stoicness in some ways, You're going to push the bolster to the right side of your mat and cross over with that left leg on top of it. So I let the right leg have a pretty strong bend, and then I lean my weight and swing the leg over to the bolster. It's not that dramatic, is it? It's not like a big swing, but it does feel like there's momentum out of that left side of my back. Okay. Sometimes adding that ball is nice to have there at the kind of at the SI area. You feel like you go a little lower than that. And then the sand, of course, is on the side of the left leg. Optional. Okay. Sometimes it's better to go with some sand, sometimes not. So when you decide, put it so it stays, even if it doesn't look like it's exactly perfect, just wherever it feels steady. And then let that left arm open and roll your head to the left. Take the moments where you feel the natural reach of the left arm. The weight is pretty heavy into that right hip. Both hips in some ways if you have sand. Breathing and sensing the rotation. And the strength that comes from it in the spine. So just keep it steady and supported. Like this is your end range. Like you don't have to force any further. There's no attempt to change it. The only change you might make is how much you relax that left arm and your head. You know, kind of inner scan the relationship of the back of that right hip towards the left. Right, one is kind of lifted up, an interesting traction through the back span. Now head back in center and change the sides. So as you bring the knees in, maybe you need to bring both knees towards your chest. Maybe that's the best way for you to have that moment in between. Maybe your feet flat on the ground and then just swivel the hips back in center. That can feel really good too. Okay, and then take your bolster to the other side of your mat on the side yard. And you might have to scoot yourself on your mat a little bit to the right. Left knee relaxes down, and then you feel that right leg kind of creep over to the bolster. Now it's interesting if you stay with the idea of the waist twisting, but it's centered. So almost like you kind of have navel towards ceiling idea, although it stretches across it, instead of rolling your shoulders over to that left side. So this is the most important part, is to keep that chest open. Okay, and sand option, side of the leg or towards the knee or towards the hip, it's up to you. Once you find that weight, then you can center, right? So once you have something supporting you, and it might be just the ball today, it might not be the sand as well. And if the arm is open on that right side, feel where the waist actually can center the heart. So the heart is kind of always in the center, isn't it? Even though it's a little off to one side, it does have this feeling of a centerpiece of the body, centerpiece of the heart. And head rolls to the right. Feel where the weight of your head is in traction. Now, if you inner scan and noticing maybe there's some hip sensation, some little bit of pull, we're going to kind of equalize those areas in the last pose. So notice when there is some restriction, which is the feeling of stretch. Well, I feel restriction, that must be doing something, is creating a little bit more expansiveness in these areas. But it's also really good to just come back to the centering and the circulation stream to the heart. You're now feeling where the removal of weight is from your thigh. And then you'll move the ball. You might like this one of motion to get right to the wall. So you roll left, use your hands to push you up, take your bolster right up to the wall, and your blanket gets pulled in next to your hips, and then sit up on the bolster and on the side, and then swing the legs upside down. You want to get right up towards the wall with your legs. It doesn't have to be right at the wall proper, like you're pressed into the wall, but some of us like more of that than others. But the idea is to get upside down. So if you have some weight of sand on your feet, it will add to it. If you have an eye pillow, then place it over your eyes. The right amount of blanket height is important here, so you feel like there's not like tension created at the neck basin, especially the side touch of the neck. If you feel that area, you want to let that soften a bit. Okay, like you're taking your pulse. Okay, arms are spread out, and let the spine all the way into the spine, into the neck, right? Those branches of circulation. And since this is focused arterially, vascular return right back to the heart, I like that to be a little bit of a study, the change in kind of the temperature into my feet, they cool off, and the abdomen moves with the breath. So enjoy the stretch of the inhale internally, because that's where it is. And as you exhale, it's external, letting go. Let the weight of the shoulders be heavy. Feel just that internal inhale and exhale, letting go. Now feeling where the knees bend a little bit and the feet shift off the wall. It's actually more than feet, it's the whole leg unit. And the knees, be aware, maybe that means move an eye pillow or just peek to your feet and slide the sand or drop it off overhead and feel where there's a crease at the knees and there's a hold of the back of the body when the knees go towards the chest, whether you clutch the legs or you simply let the legs just bend and let the arms be anywhere. Okay, there's a definition when you rock a little side to side, kind of like you're weeding your way towards length in the back. And then just hope you can keep that length. So you're going to roll to a side, let your head roll, and then push to come up. And let's take a moment where we emphasize just that perspective of internalizing and fluidity with the breathing muscles. Bring your hands up to balance either together or together with feeling the legs below. That still has a unity to it. And as you breathe in, filling the lungs, let the abdominals move. And as you exhale, bowing into the space behind your heart. Namaste.